I will talk to you about shortcomings of economics in forecasting social trends using the case study of human fertility. So first I will tackle the question why did this very idea of explaining everything using the mechanism of one discipline. Then I will show you some contributions of Gary Becker. Then I will show you my statistical modeling. I actually tested the Becker's theories using some data for European societies. Then I will ask, in my opinion, a very important question. What happens if x to y becomes minus x to y? In other words, what happens if the phenomena, if the logic changes its direction completely? How do you deal with that? And what does it tell us about economics in general? And finally, I will answer the question, what are exactly these shortcomings of economics in forecasting social trends? So here we deal with the neoclassical school of explaining everything. How do they do that? They do that by refocusing attention from a particular sphere of life to the method, to the approach. This approach being the rational choice theory approach. And if you focus on the approach, then you can extrapolate this approach to a bigger and bigger sphere of life using systematic calculation of maximizing utility in the context of scarce resources. So the tools are marginal analysis, utility reasoning, rational choice, and these has been extended everywhere to crime, suicide, fertility. And I will assess this school using its own criteria of assessment as proposed by Milton Friedman in 1953, which is the performance is to be judged by the precision, scope, conformity with experience, and the prediction it yields. In short, positive economics is or can be an objective science in precisely the same sense as any of the physical sciences. So why did I choose human fertility as a great case study? There are some theoretical and empirical reasons. I just found it really theoretically interesting. How can we ascribe rationality to human sexuality? And also empirically interesting. First of all, in the developed countries, births and deaths are the best data we can have. I have data up to the one, having assumed that nobody is born in the Białowieża forest. We have data up to every single individual. And also, as a person who tries to befriend the statistical yearbook, I've noticed some disturbing data that made me question this very rational choice. One of them is because in this Beckerian method, we have the married couple who is really good at planning. And I was questioning that, for example, with this huge frequency of abortion in 1970s Poland, where every second pregnancy was aborted, so we had almost 700,000 abortions per year. But also today, the estimates are actually worse than they were in 1970s because it happens illegally, but it's not less than 150,000 a year. And on the top of that, we have the very interestingly, sociologically interesting phenomenon of so-called emergency weddings. Currently estimated at probably 1/3 of all weddings that happen when the couple is already expecting a child. So if this theory is about planning, this planning has went in some cases spectacularly wrong. So where do these fertility models come from? They have been primarily developed by Gary Becker, who took a bit of everything from this line. So from Adam Smith, he took the division of labor as something very efficient and applied it to gender division of labor as something still efficient. From the neoclassicals, he took marginal analysis, rationality, utility maximization in the context of scarce resources, and then he extended it to as many spheres of life as possible. It's important to remember that for Gary Becker, it was not an accidental interest. It was the very core of his contribution. This is taken from the Nobel Prize website. This is exactly the justification of his Nobel Prize, extending the domain of economic theory to aspects of human behavior that were previously dealt by sociology, demography, or criminology. So what does Gary precisely say? I decided I will read for you 2 paragraphs just to give you the idea of the theory he's building. I have argued that the main purpose of marriage and families is the production and rearing of own children. I use the price of children and real income to explain, among other things, why a rise in the wage rate of working women reduces their fertility, why various government programs, such as aid to mothers with dependent children, have significantly affected the demand for children. Then each family maximizes the utility function of the quantity of children, the expenditure on each child, called the quality of children, and the quantities of other commodities. Parents have less prior information.
Slowly.
Sorry. Parents have...
Speed limit.
Speed limit. Parents have less prior information about the sex, color, physical condition, and other noticeable characteristics of children they're self-produce than of those that could be seen as in a child market. Yet the scope of such a market would be limited because parents would be more likely to put their inferior rather than their superior children up for sale or adoption if buyers were not readily able to determine quality. Look Ackerhoff for the discussion of the market for lemons. Okay. But this is very one-to-one mapping of these ideas. And since children could be understood in a similar way that lemons could, actually Becker continues with math. First we see the utility function, then we see the introduction of the limited income, and the price of children times quality of children plus times of other good times quality of other goods. And then he proceeds to some marginal analysis. So what we see on this example is actually most of important tenets of the neoclassical school. Because we see, first of all, actors are rational. Yeah, the choices that they make are logically consistent. Second of all, actors maximize their utility in the context of scarce resources. Third, we have atomization. We are not influenced by the behavior of others, by the pressures, expectations, which is especially interesting if you follow École d'Annales and, for example, Philippe Arnier and his book, The History of Childhood. What it means to be a child, what it means to be a mother, a father, really changes over time, including the resources, including the time, including the ethics of parenthood or childhood.
What Z stands for?
Z?
Yes. The last equation, the utility equation. Yes, this Z. What does it stand for? What does it represent?
Well, can I answer it in the follow-up question, because I have it in my notes, okay? The fourth tenet of neoclassical school, which is very visible here, is diminishing marginal utility. Then perfect information about the prices, which is super interesting in the case of price for children, that some of it will be born in like 20 years to come. And also there is one assumption taken from the classical school, namely that the division of labor is something very efficient. So if we take the previous formulas to their logical conclusions, it would mean that ceteris paribus, if other conditions held constant, the higher the income, the higher the fertility. What we see on the map of contemporary Europe is huge diversity of fertility. If we have a look at the two extremely rich countries like Norway and Switzerland, they are very different. The biggest European economy, Germany, the second biggest, France, and the third biggest, UK, are very different. Some of the Mediterranean countries, like France, is still different from Italy. Even though we may assume that probably the other inputs to this equation are not that different in these countries. So I decided to have a look at three of them. I'm especially interested in current Italy and Germany. As you can see, they have experienced a huge fall of fertility in the past 40 years, but the fall in fertility occurred in different waves. And in my opinion, there is some similarity of why some waves appeared one after another. So I decided to test this empirically, and I put two hypotheses: one financial and one dealing with the social norms. So the first hypothesis is the high male income, the higher the fertility, because in Beckerian model it's the male income that counts. And the second is the social acceptance of traditional gender norms is positively affected by fertility. This is logistically regression general linear model done in Stata. And what you can see just at the first side, this is gray, where there are no numbers, it's simply statistically not significant. So, but let's have a look at the men's annual income. So like 85% of this is completely not statistically significant. When it is significant, it gives opposite directions. Here it is positively related, but only for the process from 0 to 1 children. Here it is negatively related, but only for the process of getting from 2 to 3, and here from 1 to 2. When we have a look at the social, still the huge majority is statistically insignificant, but at least when it starts to be significant, it gives pretty consistent results, but usually these results are primarily driven by older generations, because my aim is not to say that everything that Becker did is nonsense. Actually, some of it works in a specific place, time, and under specific circumstances. So the previous graph showed you 4 different countries, because I treated Germany as 2 different countries, because they behave as if they were different countries. They are so demographically different. But what happens if the direction changes in time? And here we go back to this Friedmanian assumption that we can treat social life precisely as we treat natural world. So if you think of like the simplest formula from the natural world that you remember from primary school, it's like, let's think of the weight being equal to mass times gravitational strength, which is a constant equal to meters per second squared. If we apply this logic to the social world, we have to be ready that W may turn from m to minus m, and then m may turn to a constant. So we have to be ready, our models have to be ready for that. And one of my biggest criticisms is that, but mathematizing something, we freeze it in time, and then our models are very difficult to account for change. So I decided to show you just 3 examples of changing the directions. It's not just about changing the frequency. For example, here we have work and fertility. It's not about one being, for example, fertility rising or falling and work rising and falling. It's about the relationship, the direction, plus or minus, which is changing in this equation. So, for example, in 1980s, women's employment was negatively related with fertility. In less than 2 decades, not only it started to be positively related, but still this relationship was strong already by the end of the millennium, and it's actually becoming stronger and stronger. And then there is some evidence that 2 years ago, Poland also joined the group of countries where women's job is positively related to fertility. Another one is education. It's exactly the same story. Women's education used to be negatively related, currently it's positively related to fertility. But with education, I decided to give some more data, because in this Beckerian model, we have this idea of division of labor, something very efficient. He says in his work that men specialize in market skills, while women specialize in housekeeping skills. But looking at the data, it seems that women are over-specializing in everything, in both in housekeeping skills, which is actually, when you add like paid plus unpaid labor of men and women, you can see that women are very overworked in Poland, but also very over-educated. So when you have a look at the generations, it's only among our grandparents when men are better educated. Among our parents, among us, among our younger siblings, it's no longer the case, and this gap is becoming huge. So it feels that women are clearly investing in...
Clarifying question, what do the percent mean?
Here, first you look at the age group, 25 to 28. Then you look at the sex. Then you look at what percentage of this cohort of women have higher education diplomas. So here, yeah, and it drops. So basically you can see that people are right who are criticizing that our education is becoming a mass scale education, but at the same time there is underrunning current of the second very important process, that the education is happening to the detriment of men. So here we have over-specialization in both housekeeping and market skills. But here we have something even more important. Here we have very important question. People are divided by their education, primary, basic, secondary, higher, and then by gender. And then we ask them the question, would you resign from work for the sake of your family if your partner would earn so much money that the family can live very comfortably? And here we see that, for example, women and men with higher education, first of all, are very similar to each other, and second of all, are very unlikely to drop the work. Like almost 70% of them would not be ready to do that. And this gives us a very important lesson, because this is where we should complement economic analysis with a little bit of hermeneutics. Namely, hermeneutics in a sense, what it means to work. What does work mean to you? Because what we observe is the growing number of people for whom work is something much more than just the salary you get to your pocket. And it's extremely important because in economic models, as you know, we have the analysis of substitutes. And if you think that work is done for money, then the substitute of work should be, for example, equivalent of a salary. And this has been very consequential in the public policy of the OECD countries in the past 40 years. Even one OECD report from 2003 by Slavos claims that actually it was the Beckerian model that fueled the demographic policies of most of the OECD countries in the second half of the 20th century. The model that assumes that the substitute of work is money, then the logical consequence is that if you want the fertility to rise, you should simply give cash benefits, rather than, for example, kind or institutional support or labor market. But here we have something else as well. It's not only the variables that are changing. Variables are changing, the existing ones are changing directions, but also the unit of analysis is changing. Beckerian unit of analysis was a married couple. A married couple that plans. The point is that currently in Europe, around half of the children are born outside of the wedlock. This, in some countries, Scandinavia, France, is a huge majority. In parent countries, it's 25%, a huge increase from like single-digit numbers only 10 years ago. So actually, this is becoming a huge thing. In parent, we have already voivodeships like northern, like the one where Szczecin is the capital city, zachodniopomorskie, where out of the wedlock births are around 45%. So we are approaching this European average. So we see that married couples no longer the unit of analysis. And what is more important is that here we see that these people have a lot in countries where people have a lot of, are more likely to have children out of the wedlock. The fertility is also higher. Previously, the relationship was negative. And so there are three main things about marriage as an institution that are changing. The first is frequency of marriage. Look, this is per 1,000 population. Like, people are less and less likely to get married. So frequency of marriage interruption rising hugely. And look at what happens in the urban areas. It's almost half of them. And the third is the meaning of marriage, what it means to be married. Why do people do that? Because we know that people no longer do that for children. And that more and more children are born in different circumstances, in partnership, but also to single mothers. Coming back to Becker, in this sentence, this is the opening sentence of his treatise on family, chapter Demand for Children. I underlined everything which is no longer empirically true today. So the only sentence that I did not underline is, I use the price of children and real income to explain. Everything else changed either the meaning or the direction. So for example, Why a rise in the wage rate of working women reduces their fertility? Statistically speaking, it increases, not reduces. Why various government programs, such as Aid to Mothers, understood as cash transfers, affected the demand? Actually, currently we have plenty of data showing that it's the kind benefit rather than cash benefit that work. And in the countries, societies with a high percentage of educated women, these cash transfers are no longer effective, like German kindergarten, that was a spectacular failure. I'm running out of time? Okay, so I will skip my model of you, and I will come straight to conclusions. So in my opinion, the shortcomings of neoclassical economics in forecasting social trends stem from at least 5 different things. First of all, as I said, if we treat everything like physical laws, if we mathematize, we freeze relationships in time, making them unresponsive to social change. Second of all, economists have been very attached to their own variables, being income, price, and quantity. But in fact, we see that some post-material values have much stronger explanatory power for human fertility. These post-material values being quality of institutions, social trust, women's gender equality, relative income, aspirations. So actually, currently, post-material ones have stronger explanatory power than material ones. Then we have very dehumanized idea of efficiency and division of labor, saying that it's the most efficient if women take care of a home and men of something else. We see that it's not working, but it's not happening. And it's clearly linked to the next one, which is instrumental idea of work. That work is not just for money, and if we don't get this idea, we will keep providing wrong substitutes for work. And the fifth one, the meta one, I want to leave you with, is the general question: don't we all have too much faith in social predictions? Thank you.